What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Paranormal Council. I'll be your host, Josh Morris. Follow me with Jen Daniels, Stacy Tallich, and Chanel. Courtney? Courtney. Yeah. Okay. I'm still getting everybody's names down, okay? I mean, even though I've known a few of you for a while now. But, guys, join us tonight. We have an amazing episode. It's going to be all about witchcraft. And yes, I am playing the role of the devil's advocate. Maybe even you watching out there, I'm going to be the average person that maybe I don't believe in witchcraft and I need some convincing. So we are going to dive all into that world tonight. So stick around. You're not going to want to miss this. And also, if you like this type of content, guys, hit like, hit subscribe, because we're going to be doing this every Thursday night, and we cover different topics about all types of paranormal, everything from even AI technological type stuff all the way down to even cryptids and like UFOs and like some of the other off the wall paranormal stuff. So let's get into it without further ado. Guys, how are you all doing tonight? Are you guys excited as I am for this witchcraft episode?
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get going, folks. So witchcraft, by sort of AI definition, because I like using AI now, AI is the use of magic. Witchcraft is the use of magic or supernatural power, which can be practiced for different purposes like healing, divination, or causing harm. Which, while traditionally associated with malevolent acts, the term has evolved and now also refer to modern pagan religions like Wicca. A person practicing witchcraft is called a witch. Okay, so that's like a quick little paragraph definition. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to say, what do you think? What's your definition of witchcraft? Like, how do you perceive witchcraft?
Well, all witches have their own familiar, so here's mine who just wants to be involved this evening, apparently. I think that the term witch, I could start there. That is completely and totally subjective because not everybody that practices witchcraft in whatever form identifies as a witch. So some identify as spiritualists, some identify as warlocks, some identify as priests or priestesses. So that in itself, like, that's completely subjective. That phrasing of everybody that practices witchcraft is a witch. But are they though? Like, we can't identify people and how they choose that. And then it's very personal.
I know, like, if I was a regular person and somebody said, yeah, I perform witchcraft, I would just label them as a witch.
I think it's like a default, right? But when you look at the actual practice of it, it's not a default. Not every single witch is a warlock, is a spiritualist, is a priestess. You know what I'm saying? So completely personal.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I don't even think that within covens they don't even agree on how to practice, and there's open practice and closed practice. And then there are witches that aren't in covens, and then there are people who just have witchy tendencies that get labeled. And so I don't think, I think the term is so widely confused and generally applied to everybody. And I mean, I've heard many people argue that anybody with abilities is a witch because it's supernatural. It's not human, it's not spiritual, it's supernatural done by witchcraft. And so I think ultimately the biggest confusion of it is, what is it really? And how is it viewed and how is it practiced? And I think that's where the term has gotten its stigma from, because people who practice blood magic are scary, and people who practice magic are not, they're witches, but they're not from the viewpoint of other witches. So it really just, it depends. And I think that's where all the confusion is. And everybody hears the term witch and freaks out.
I think the term witch has, first off, that has had a negative connotation for thousands of years. It's not just because of Christianity or mainstream religion. I think that the lack of understanding really fuels the stigma that's still around it. Because like in today's day and age, where we're so like open and accepting of one another, and look, we live in America, right, where freedom of religion is the thing, but in certain areas you can still be persecuted for practicing witchcraft. So yeah, it's so deep rooted and so ingrained in our culture and our way of thinking that until that is undone, there's going to be that stigma around it and that lack of understanding, because people, like you said, Jen, are just, it's so scary. But blood magic isn't always negative.
Well, and before I let Stacy, I'm going to let Stacy kind of give his perspective on witchcraft, and then also Stacy, if you want to lead into maybe what all can be encompassed under that witchcraft umbrella, like hoodoo or something, voodoo, those things, whatever. I don't know. Like, but real quick, what I want to add to this, because I'm actually going to add something to this too, is so one of the sort of the legend of the witch, right? Some of how that came to be, I did extensive studies on the birth of Halloween, right? Like the evolution, and the witches really came from sort of old world meets new world, in those Middle Ages and stuff, where a lot of what we considered, or back then what ended up being considered witches, were actually a lot of healers and things, old world healers. And so unfortunately they tended to end up being, a lot of times, these women that were living alone, and they had these very, type country clothes. They had cats hanging around a lot of times with the country hearths, the little cauldrons and stuff. A lot of that became the classic stereotypes as the religion, boom, took over the new world, so to speak, with the religion and stuff, and then the fighting against the old, uh, uh, brewing up potions and things like that, healing stuff. So again, it shifted from what used to be the old healers into the classic stereotypes that we kind of know through actually a few hundred years in that time frame. But anyways, I just wanted to throw that little bit of knowledge out your guys' way. Outlaw Paranormal said, hope y'all doing all right tonight. Good to see you, Jimmy. Good guy. Love working with them. Stacy, all right, buddy. So, what do you think about what's your definition of witchcraft, and what do you think all encompasses in that?
Well, we want to go to the way back machine. Historically speaking, through most of human history, religion and politics has been intertwined. You haven't had two separate things, and whenever one kind of politics falls out of favor, it's demonized, and so to the religion. If you go back to even like the ancient Romans, they they were pantheistic. They had many different gods, and everyone was required to pray to Caesar, or actually pray to Jupiter, but Caesar was Jupiter on Earth. So you had to pray to Caesar. And if you didn't, you were considered either a witch or an atheist, which was often worse. The Jews in the early days were often labeled as atheists because they only had one God and they refused to pray to Caesar, and they were persecuted for it. The term witch came about with the monotheistic rise primarily. Because all of the old pagan ways were considered to be witchcraft. If you had any kind of tradition whatsoever in paganism, it was considered witchcraft. And it actually, for 200 years, the Roman Catholics, went to war with the pagan war. They actually called it the Pagan Wars. After 200 years, they decided, you know what, let's just kind of meld together and not worry about things. So you see a lot of pagan iconography in Catholicism because it absorbed a lot of that. But what they did is they kept the calendar. If you notice the calendar that we have, the days of the week, they're astrological. You have Sunday, S-U-N day, Monday, which is Moon Day, Tuesday, which is Tuaz, which is another name for Thor. You have Wednesday, which I can't remember. It's another Nordic deity. and Thursday is Thor, Friday is Frigga. So it's Saturday being Saturn. These are all pagan days that were honored in the pagan calendar that were sacred. And the Romans decided, you know what, we'll just keep that, you know. But for 200 years, they went to war and labeled all kinds of things as being witchcraft. And for the most part, it was unwarranted because somewhere along the way, someone changed Deuteronomy from thou shalt not suffer a thief to live to thou not suffer a witch to live. And they just switched it up, and it caused all kinds of, you know, commotion after that, because now it was biblical. And they decided that that was how they were going to persecute anyone who was not faithful to the Christian religion. And honestly, it wasn't just Christians. Muslims did it too. They have a whole thing on infidels, which includes witchcraft. Anybody who's not a worshiper of the book, according to the Quran, is a witch, which the worshippers of the book are Jews, Islam, and Christians. Any other religion, except for what they known as the Sabians. The Sabians are the ones that created astrology. Saba means point of light or star. They created our modern astrology. They were okay. You know, the crescent moon that Islam uses, that was a Sabian symbol. So they decided, you know what, we're going to go, they're not witches. But everybody else, they're an infidel. They're witches. Jesus himself, do you know what he was charged with when they put him on the cross? What the actual charge?
You're asking?
Josh.
Oh, what his charge was?
Yeah,
I thought it was like being a false messiah.
I was going to say blasphemy, wasn't it?
Blasphemy is one of them, but sorcery and witchcraft, because he was challenged to perform a miracle in the temple, the only place where witchcraft has no sway, and he refused. So he was performing miracles out in the world, but he refused to do it in the temple.
Right.
Because of that, it showed that he was practicing sorcery and witchcraft, and that's what put him on the cross. But they don't actually put that in the Bible, because, you know, you can't persecute other people for witchcraft when your Savior was also persecuted for witchcraft. So, but by and large, it's more of a political campaign than it is an actual understanding of any kind of mysticism whatsoever. You know, Kabbalah.
Well, I was going to add that real quick too. Like on the politics too, is even pre-Roman times like that, in ancient times, almost all rulers had like a shaman. They relied on divination.
Yes.
You know, they would not attack unless like the shaman was like, hey, according to the birds, depending what you know, whether it was sheep guts, whatever divination it was, there's all kinds of forms. We don't have to get into that today, but whatever types of forms that they were using, like they would be like, hey, is it the right time to attack? Or, you know, they would turn like, and so that's where a lot of power came to.
A lot of wars too.
Like, you know,
a lot of the disputes that are still happening in Israel today, in the Middle East, in Palestine, go all the way back to when they were throwing lots. Lots are a form of divination. Throwing lots on what God said was Judea. And, you know, the river to the sea type stuff, that was what was given as a lot from what the Jewish temple said was Israel. We're still fighting over that. The things that, you know, from 2,000-3,000 years ago that were, you know, thrown in divination, which is basically it was a form of dice, almost like a dreidel, you know, determining what is what, and they would interpret it, you know, whatever, you know, like throwing the bones. And it has been held as law ever since. You know, these were ancient Kabbalah practices, not anything within Judaism itself. It's things they brought back from Babylonian 500 years of captivity, of Babylonian rule, that essentially became the standard of the high priests, the Kabbalists.
So
But
we had the so we basically definitely established that sort of that sorcery, divination, or even witches were an integral part of our history coming up into the modern terms. So where does that put us now in modern times with what all is considered under witchcraft?
well, if you go, what we understand as modern witchcraft or Wicca, it really came about in the 1950s with Raymond Buckland. He wrote a book saying that he was a traditional witch from a coven from his mother and his grandmother, and they taught him everything since he was a kid. And he wrote this book on how to actually, you know, conduct yourself and your coven initiations, all of that in his books. And when it comes down to it, he renamed witchcraft Wicca as more of a loophole in English law, because it was at the time when he wrote it from England. Yeah.
I think it's the blue one, which I lent to my friend who's a priest, but I also have the red one by Buckland.
Yeah, I bought it way back in the day too. I don't have it anymore.
Yeah,
but,
I think it's the blue one you're talking about.
In that he worked a loophole in British law to where because witchcraft was illegal at the time that he wrote it, that it wasn't witchcraft, it was something different. And it got him to side skirt a lot of the witchcraft laws that were in England. They rescinded those in the 70s, I think it was, the early 70s. But he was under persecution himself, at least in the media, for quite a while. And it didn't help that the last British guy who was promoting witchcraft was Aleister Crowley, you know, the beast himself,
Mr.
sided
Crowley?
with Hitler during the war and everything. So it didn't help that was still in everybody's mouths as far as the taste was concerned. But he wrote the first Wicca book and essentially created a religion, whether he intended to do that or not. So
Okay. So all right, so I want to know, like, I want to get into the nitty gritty because I know a lot of people, we are, especially if you're like somebody that's like a non believer and you're kind of like, oh, this witchcraft stuff, ooh, whatever. So, first of all, let's kind of talk first. Who are the different type of people that uses witchcraft right now? Like, who's our modern witches?
Everybody uses witchcraft in some way, form, like shape, form, or fashion. A lot of people don't know it.
Boring? No, I mean, specifically, I'm not talking about, philosophically who uses witchcraft. I'm talking about who is practicing witchcraft out there on a actual level.
Well, I mean, do you make a wish when you blow out birthday candles?
No.
Do you take communion when you go to church?
Do what?
Do you take communion when you go to church?
Yeah,
you actually consuming a god? Where do you think that came from?
Well, I understand that.
Yeah,
so we can discuss that too in a second. We'll discuss the difference between spiritual, godlike, or witchy, devil-like craft. And is there a difference?
Well, I have a whole answer for that, Josh, but I will sit back and let somebody else talk.
I mean, I want to know, like, so you're saying, like, hey, if I perform witchcraft by praying to God, then that's going to get me thrown in hell?
Communing with spirits, well.
Oh, no. I don't believe that. Yeah. According to the Bible. Well, it's so individualized, and that's the thing. Like, when I have this discussion, like, it's so individualized. Everybody's religion, no matter what you identify as, whether you're Jewish, Christian, Wiccan, spiritualist, whatever, your religion is specific to yourself. So even though you can go to a church every Sunday and listen to a man speak on a pulpit, what you're getting is his interpretation of the message that he was given. But how is that any different than going to a psychic and having your cards read? Because they also are getting messages that they're given. Or how's it any different from just talking to your friend and they're like, hey, by the way, I had this weird dream about you? Because then you're also getting a message that that person was given. It's all kind of the same. It just has different terms and different, like you said, it's all rooted in politics and really control of masses. That's what religion was created for, organized religion. So, yeah. What do you think of that, Josh?
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to, like, you know, because I know like a lot of people are going to watch this and say, what the hell? Like, you're telling me that if I am going to sit there and like we're talking about the difference between practicing religion, but then like witchcraft, and we're trying to lump them together in that same thing. I think there's got to be some separation of whether it's intention, or something, okay? Because clearly there's going to be different intention imposed on different things, right? Just like there's intention with different spells, curses, those type of things, which we'll get into, versus praying and positive things. So, you know, and I guess this is what I'm kind of looking at is like, what are we got to get down to the nuts and bolts of witchcraft, all right? So I don't think you're going to convince people that like, hey, when you pray, you're practicing witchcraft.
Well, it's all about the bucket you're standing in. Even in Christianity, you have different interpretations of what is a sin. In witchcraft, in all of Christianity is considered a sin. It's just where is the sin that makes it this or that. In some denominations, men and women who are not married, dancing is a sin. Is it witchcraft? No. But if you are talking with spirits in a ghost hunt, yeah, that's witchcraft. Dancing with a snake, that's perfectly fine. But if you are, using various teas to, make yourself feel better because you're sick or whatever, that could be considered witchcraft, because you're dealing with the very term pharmaca. Pharmaca literally means witchcraft. Pharmaca, where we get the word pharmacy. It's really all a part of the word, or the bucket in which you stand in what is considered to be witchcraft. And it's all politically based off of whatever religious interpretation you've got going on. That in and of itself, sometimes people get really tired of being accused of witchcraft, and they're like, all right, fine, I'm a witch. Great. Now what? And then there's nothing you can do because they've now assumed it, and you have no more power. It's the shaming goes away. And that's really all it's for, is shaming. So what is witchcraft? It really depends on where you're at, you personally.
Okay. You guys are copping out on me tonight, man. You're skirting around it. You're telling me all the generic stuff. Well, it depends on how you look at it from a certain point of view.
Well, it kind of does, Josh, but at the same time, if you really want to get into like nuts and bolts of it, we can do that too. Because
look, these mofos that watching, they're gonna be like, all right, who's the witches? Who's the witches? Where are they at? They want to know. Can you go to a witch? Can you go to a witch? Can you knock on their door and say, hey, make me a potion? Right? That's what they want to go to. They want a physical warlord,
or a purple door.
A warlock or wizard or witch. Okay, that's what they want to know. They don't want to know the philosophical point of view much, because yeah, technically we can get into prayers and like, okay, yeah, that's some form of wizardry, right?
You can go to New Orleans, down on Bourbon Street, and then in the outskirts of Bourbon or the French Quarter, And, you swing a chicken and you'll hit a witch. It's just, they're everywhere. And they advertise openly. Yeah, you can go and find those people who make anything you want. Dealing with whether it's money, love, revenge, they don't care. They'll make it for you.
Okay. Well, let's get into that because I want to know, like, this witchcraft, is it fake or is it real? What's going on here? So, all right. So let me just put this out there to the council, right? Let's say me as an average person, I'm like, okay, I want to go and I want to go do something. I want a potion for somebody. Is that going to work? All right. Maybe it's a potion. Maybe it's something for my work, my boss or something. Right? Like
something for him or for something to do on him. You know what I mean? That makes a difference.
Right.
If it's,
So let's come up with a scenario. Let's say I wanted to do something negative to somebody. Does it work though? That's what I'm saying. Can I go somebody? Like, how does that work? And does it work?
Josh, don't mess up people's free will. That's just rude.
That's not the question.
Besides manners.
Yeah,
so let's go back to Adrian. Let's go back to Adrian's statement. There's a difference in intention, if I recall correctly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has a lot to do with it, right? So pretty much universally, when you're talking about doing magic or you're talking about doing witchcraft, there's a discussion about intention, right?
Mm-hmm.
With intention, you are on a base level psychologically rewriting how you are thinking about this situation or this person. When you are doing an activity such as casting a spell or lighting a candle and doing cord cutting, you are concreting that change mentally with a physical action, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that has to do with it that way. But if you're going to do something negative or positive, you're doing it both. It doesn't really matter if it's negative or positive. It has the same effect because you're doing the same things, right? People talk about manifesting all the time. It's kind of more of a discussion, in my opinion, about, utilizing energies and acknowledging our own brains and how they function, as opposed to the craft itself, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like some people can...
Sorry, Jen.
Some people are like, oh, I'm protected. I have my crystal. Other people are like, oh, well, I had to light a protection candle. Different things work for different people for different reasons. Some things don't work for certain people for different reasons. And it has to do with their history, their past, what they were taught, what they believe, what their personal experiences are, potentially even bloodline beliefs, as opposed to, yeah, here's a crystal that works, or I'm going to blow out a candle too early. There's so many rules on it. But at the end of the day, I think honestly, it's all utilizing energies, learning how to do that. And to be able to do that, you have to understand that when we're talking about the paranormal, supernatural, things like that, we're utilizing that part of our brain that we don't know we're using and we're not used to using. Chanel and I have actually talked about this, where they've been doing some studies in like people with autism and how their brains work differently. It's like the normal pathways that we would expect to see in a brain, you're seeing it on a different path in an autistic brain. It's kind of the same thing when people have abilities, right? They're utilizing a different part of their brain, which is also why it's so common to see after a trauma. Right? The brain learns to reroute around these trauma areas to be able to continue to function. And so that's why you see a lot more people with abilities having had a history of trauma. So
the remapping of the brain only happens up until the age of 2. After that, it's like different areas of your brain get activated when you have, like when you say you get into a car accident. And before then, you didn't have like precognition, and you get into a car accident, and then boom, all of a sudden you have this gift of precognition. And you just know some things sometimes, and you're like, whoa, that's new, right? That is like a different part of your brain being activated that really was kind of dormant before. below the age of 2, your brain will remap. And what that means is that if you're 18 months old and you fall downstairs, right, and all of a sudden you can still speak, even though you hit like the front of your head, right, which is your prefrontal cortex, which is like this is where your speech comes from, right in the very front. You hit your head here at 18 months old, that ability to speak is going to go back here. And I know this is a totally different subject, but I just wanted to clarify. So that's why a 2-year-old, 18-month-old can hit their head and still be able to speak. Might be regressed a little bit, but it's because it went to a different part of the brain instead of being in the prefrontal cortex.
Well, your brain is always remapping neurons and at that level all of the time. It's how memory is actually formed.
Pruning synapses and whatnot. Yeah.
Right. In creating those pathways happens through positive or negative affirmation, and your brain will, hold those. And we call them habits, but your brain actually wires those as you go through life, and you can rewire those by forcing yourself to quit habits like smoking, for instance. It takes a while because it's chemically based with addiction and all, but after a while, it's all psychological. 3 days is all you have in your body worth of nicotine. After that, the withdrawals go pretty quickly, physically. But the habit that you developed in smoking is there, and it's muscle memory. Neurons have to be rewired in order for that to happen, and it takes a minimum of 21 days. 90 days is better. Yeah. But as far as witchcraft is concerned, the whole idea of working with energy, I'm a little tired of that concept of, working with energy, creating energy, all that. And I know it's in the parlance and everybody uses it for everything now, and I can't fight it. But the whole idea for me is the universe is information based. E equals MC square. Energy is mass, and mass is information. If you take the information of gold and embed it into energy, you get gold. Energy by itself cannot create gold. You have to have the information in order to transport it. And your informational base is your brain, your quantum computer. And when you pray or push your intent, that is information, a prompt, like an AI prompt, to actually get the universe, the big computer that we live in, to respond to it. And you can use various programming hacks in order to enhance the concept in which you're trying to convey to the universe what it is that you want. Whereas some witchcraft, like in hoodoo, will use elemental things like sticks or bugs or various bones, things of that kind, from specific animals that have a informational matrix to convey an idea of what it is that you're trying to do. For example, there's this thing in hoodoo called hot foot powder or doom, death unto my enemies. That is a concoction of various things with graveyard dirt from, a murderer, snakeskin, spiders, sulfur, all mixed together into a powder that you can throw at someone with the intention of doing harm to them. And that informational matrix that you just created is the spell. So
now we're talking. All right. Now listen. No, go ahead. But no, look. All right, look. You guys are full of information. I love that because you guys said a lot of cool stuff. But I want to know how to get rid of my boss. I mean, I want to know. Now, keep in mind, if my boss is watching, this is not real. I'm just using this as a scenario. Okay, so
Josh, I have a simple spell for that.
But I want to hurt my boss.
Your boss.
So,
it's called I Quit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, simple answer. You're going to HR tomorrow.
Yeah. Just say
Yeah,
I quit. There's your. You don't even have to do it 3 times.
but see, like I said, I know. Can I go to somebody and is this going to work? Is this what can we do? That's what I'm saying. Like, does this stuff really work?
Yes, you can go to somebody and request a spell, right?
Okay.
Or whatever you want, whether it's to mess with people's free will or a love spell or whatever. However, is it as effective if you do it yourself? That's yet to be determined. I think that most people that practice witchcraft and identify as practicing witchcraft in whatever form, we're going to say that it's actually better if you just do it yourself. It's going to be most effective.
Right. But can you really do it? That's my question. Okay.
I had a good day.
You said we can affect free will, which I'm not sure. I'm not convinced on that. So you're telling me there's a spell that's going to change free will, somebody's free will out there, and how would that work then? Is it magic? How does that magic work? I mean, I need to know. You need to let me know. Convince me that magic is real.
Can hypnosis affect free will?
I think hypnosis could, yeah.
It's along the same lines. If you perform witchcraft with somebody who has their mental defenses down, you're sending information, whether it be telepathically or vis-a-vis using mediators like the dead to send to someone who then go whisper in their ear when their defenses are down. They're not paying attention. They just take the information in and consider it to be their own idea. I think it would be a good idea if I just walk in front of this bus. That would be awesome. Things like that. They have no clue. You didn't remove their free will. You gave them the idea and they acted upon it.
Okay. So now at least we're getting to some nitty gritty. So what we're saying is that some of this stuff is more mental or telepathically implanted.
Can be.
Because, okay, so I'm going to go completely average person. And I'm going to say all I know about witchcraft, even though I do know more. But a lot of the average people, they see witchcraft as like they do in Hollywood. They see Eye of Newt, they see all these ingredients, blood grass or something. They see all these things put in these potions, and then somebody drinks it, or they spike somebody's drink, and all of a sudden this person is thinking a different way, or all these different things. So my question is, does that really exist?
Well, not the lightning bolt from the fingers thing. That's pure Hollywood.
I had to learn that one.
The lightning bolts just go up your dowsing rods, Josh.
That's true. That's true. That was the wrong way. I wanted them to come out my fingers, not up my. But no, I mean seriously, like so. What is okay? Well, then I'll try to change the subject because I'm kind of was trying to get you all to get into the curse stuff and the potions and things, but let's look at it from another angle. Well, first of all, let me Alpha kind of threw something out there. He wanted Stacy. He said, that being said, Stacy, what if your intention wasn't actually to harm? Let's say you used the same powder you mentioned, but the intent wasn't to harm, but to help another ailment.
Well, then you don't know what you're doing. If you're using things like Doom or Goofer Dust, those are inherently elemental things that are nasty. They're predatory. They represent death. Venomous snakes, venomous spiders, things that are considered to be antithetical to healing are used in things like that. Your intention has no bearing at that point because the code that you sent, the informational matrix that you produced in that is to cause great harm. Whether it causes death, that's a whole other ball of wax, because a lot of that, no one has the authority to kill another person, whether it be through witchcraft or any other means. People do all the time, but no one has the authority to do so. And that, in and of itself, you're committing a much greater sin. So witchcraft very rarely, if ever, can be blamed for killing someone. The karmic, I don't know, straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. If you're dealing with someone who's a real shitbag, who has a lot of karma, bad karma, and your little was the straw that broke the camel's back, okay, fine. But you can't take total credit for it. It was something that was built up by that person's own shitbaggery. So
Okay. Yeah. Now, so the angle I'm kind of glad you covered that, Stacy. So the angle I was getting into is also was that. So let's talk about why you would use witchcraft, right? Let's get into like why you'd use it. Why would somebody use witchcraft? Obviously, we did talk a little bit about the technical definition of healing, divination, and causing harm. Obviously, we covered a little bit of causing harm. So, so let's talk a little bit about maybe healing and divination.
Well, definitely like protection, binding. Those are big reasons that like green and white witches, do. That's why we do what we do. That's why
Okay, well, explain those.
We'll put a sigil out with some cinnamon or blow it out our front doors.
Explain those for the average person.
Okay, so are you talking about sigil or blowing the cinnamon out, or
Blowing
No,
what
different
out?
types of witches: green, white, gray.
No, I meant like you were talking about like the binding and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like some of these things, like I said, people don't know what these things are. They hear these terms sometimes, and a lot of average people don't know what they are. So remember, sometimes we got to make sure people know even just the basics, right?
Okay, so a binding spell, for instance, is the easiest way to do like a protection spell. Jen had mentioned a cord cutting earlier. That's kind of a form of a binding. It's more of a separating, but it's also a binding spell in itself. So a binding spell is a way to protect yourself from evil, whether that be evil person, evil energy, etc. Or you can protect others. So, like, you can do a binding spell by writing somebody's name on an egg, wrapping it around an egg, and throwing the egg into, like, the woods. And then, essentially, when the egg finally, like, expands or whatever, it breaks it, and then that's supposed to bind them and keep them away. We do have, like, the free will thing that comes into this sometimes, especially if you don't mess with people's free will. And so, like, when you do that, it comes down to intention, which we've talked about multiple times, right? Like, I don't want to do this person any harm. However, like, I bind thee. And so people are able to put blocks and things like that. There's a lot of, like, little nitty-gritty things that can come into that as well, especially if they themselves practice witchcraft. But, yeah, so a binding spell is a form of protection. Even like I said, the first of the month, if you take cinnamon and blow it out your front door, it's supposed to ward off evil spirits and essentially attract like good things. There's also like sigils, which there's a certain one that you do for protection, and it's like you put it underneath.
It's really funny, Chanel, because every one of these spells that you're talking about, I have heard them in the negative form instead of the positive.
And I only do
a freezer spell is a binding spell.
It is.
And I have heard that you should never blow cinnamon out your door. You only blow it in.
Yeah.
And like there's so many rules and so many different perspectives.
Right. It's so individualized and how you want to do it. And it, like we use that intention word often.
Who's blowing cinnamon? What the hell?
It's okay, Josh. We'll teach you. Jen, we'll just put him in a 101 class.
We'll turn him into a warlock yet.
Or a witch, according to Chris. We'll turn him into a priest.
A priest?
A priest. Or a priestess. John, you want to be a priest. Cinnamon, that's exactly it.
There we go. Perfect. Josh has a new nickname. Everybody's going to start calling him Cinnamon. Teps is out the window.
I was going to say,
I just heard something about blowing cinnamon. I'm like, what?
Spell with that.
Oh, okay. I had to have a little fun there. I had to have a little fun. Okay. But, okay, so, all right, so I guess I hear some differences kind of going on. So, what is that also? So, if we're talking about blowing in something, blowing out something, but like supposedly they're the same thing. So is that really come down to intent then? Is it just like, does that really matter whether you are doing the cinnamon in or cinnamon out? Is it just is whether the intention is there?
That's the
What
deciding factor, is the intention.
it's a communication. What you're doing is a communication. That's the code, the informational matrix that we're talking about. Cinnamon is a spice. I mean, a lot of people use it as in to sweeten up their stuff with sugar and cinnamon. It tastes really yummy. But cinnamon by itself is hot. It's a spice. And that hotness is what is used in particular different spells. Because each spell or each element has its own element. You know, you have wind, water, earth, and fire. And uh, each thing that you have in the spells represents one of those things. Cinnamon is hot, it's a fire. And if you're going to do something with cinnamon, you're doing it with heat. And that has an activation process. Sulfur is the same thing. It ignites and it's hot. Gunpowder, you use it, it's hot. You can embed intention into objects just by setting them on fire. For instance, railroad spikes. If you have 4 railroad spikes and you pour gunpowder over the top of them, write your little spell, say your little spell, light the paper, throw it on top, and it goes, woof, you know, just like that. And it embeds that prayer or that conjuring into that iron. And you can put those at the 4 corners of your property as a perimeter for protection. You know, the
You
heat
set
that
the
you're
word.
applying to it, the energy that is being expelled on it is what is actually used as a perimeter at that point, turning it into holy ground.
So you're kind of talking about the concept of programming.
Yes.
And when people talk about programming their crystals and things like that.
Yeah. And, you know, whatever works on I'm not really familiar with the whole concept of all of these different kinds of crystals. I understand quartz, rose quartz, but all the other ones, I never really understood the differences between them. But, you know, I'm more of a, you know, earth kind of guy. You know, everything that comes out of the earth, dirt has a lot of information in it because a lot happens on top of the earth. Things die, wars happen, um, you know, various big events, you know, homes rise and fall, they burn to the ground, all kinds of murders happen all the time in weird spots. That ground itself has information that the dirt can actually be used in different spells. You know, graveyard dirt, for instance. You know, there's a lot of, depending on the person who's buried there, what kind of a person they were, that informational matrix seeps into the dirt. And that kind of gives, you know, a boost to whatever intention that you've got going on. You know, the Catholic Church recognizes this too. They have different levels of reliquaries or the type of magical or holy object that you can have. If you, let's say, touch the Pope with an object, it's a first class relic. You know, if you got the blood of a saint, the hair, the bone, fingernail, material of a particular saint, that's a first class relic. You can pray directly to that saint as though he was standing in front of you and get miracles from the angels and things. The second class relic would be something that that person touched, a handkerchief, something that they wrote with their own hand, wrote their an autograph. That's a second class relic that can be used to do the same kind of thing, just doesn't have as much juice behind it. And then you have third class relic, which is something that touched a thing that touched a thing. So if you had like a tissue and you touched the sarcophagus of the dead pope, which has actually got the pope inside, that would be a third class relic. And these have various levels of power because of the information transfer that took place.
So I wonder if like
that's-
for a second class relic, I wonder if the Shroud of Turin would be,
It's actually a first class relic because it has biological material.
True. That's true. You're probably right there. Yeah, I was wondering. So, I don't know. There's now they're using AI on the Shroud of Turin. They're having some pretty crazy stuff.
Mm.
So you're talking about the residual for the sake of not having a better term, the residual energy, the imprint of history on the land, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on these objects. And, we're in the paranormal and we talk about residual energies in homes and spirits in homes and residual noises and seeing residual spirits.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's really the same thing when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Just the imprintation of the past on those spaces, and then we're experiencing them again. It's like the same thing with witchcraft. When we put these intentions into these objects, right, we're then using that imprinted energy and showing it to others, so to speak.
Well, consciousness is pure information. Consciousness has no mass. It has no energetic consistency. It is pure raw information. And consciousness in of itself exists and cannot be essentially created or destroyed. It just is. And when you recognize that consciousness, whether it be from spirits or whether it be from us, the universe itself is consciousness. We are all part of the same consciousness. It's just we're partitioned, and we have access to that consciousness, that cosmic consciousness. I know I hate that term. Cosmic consciousness, dude. No, it's the universal consciousness that most people refer to as God is in all of us. We're just a little slice of divinity. And that informational matrix is in us and in everything. It just looks different. And being able to communicate with something that we're partitioned from is the difficult part. And creating spells to create that messaging system is really what witchcraft comes down to.
Yeah. So, and I think I want to throw into I think when Jen was talking about residual and stuff like that and imprinting, energy is not, it's constant, it's moving, it's all around, it's flowing. So I think, there's sometimes energies can be in that same pattern, can be trapped in that same pattern and replay throughout because energy is indefinite, right? So I think you can have memories and energy so strong from events that those energy flows can get in that pattern, much like a recording. How tapes magnetize and stuff like that, like cassette recordings and stuff, right? So, and then of course, a lot of other things contain energies for just, again, you can imprint on these things, whether or not they last long. To me, I equate it to when you, close your eyes and you see something, when you look at the sun or whatever, don't look at the sun, but, and then it kind of fades after a while, but you can still see that imprint for a little bit. Well, imagine that, but on a longer scale. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So witchcraft, we've covered a huge ground on witchcraft tonight. When it comes to history, maybe how you would win. I guess for the average person though, let's hear some last minute closing cases on on why witchcraft works. Okay, tell me one, like if you're a closing attorney and you want to do your closing argument, okay, and I'm the jury, I want to hear what. Tell me, convince me why I should vote that witchcraft is real. Okay, convince me. What's your closing case? Who wants to go first? We're gonna go around. Chanel.
Josh, it's not going to work for you because you don't believe in it. If you don't believe in your magic, it's not going to work. So
that's not going to convince me. Wait,
I'm not trying to.
Well,
I'm being the opposite side.
Well, it may not work for him.
Josh, you're not the killer because
it may not work for him. Witchcraft may not work for him, but it'll work on him.
Ooh.
You don't have to be a believer in order to feel the effects.
I am under some spells.
That's probably the biggest misnomer that people like the amazing Randy and a lot of the debunkers like to throw out there. I don't believe in it. It has no effect on me. Those are not two the same. You don't have to believe in gravity in order for it to work. So, it's not a belief system in that regard. It will work because it's part of the universe. It's part of the machinations of everything that makes everything go. And if you don't want to believe in gravity, that's fine. I got a cliff over here that you can defy. So.
Okay. Anybody else want to convince me?
Convince you? Maybe not. I mean, honestly, Baptists and Catholics don't always get along, right? Different covens don't always get along. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, it's about personal spirituality. It's about your knowledge and understanding of your consciousness and your intentions and how you choose to use that. And I think there's so many people that just go around throwing out the word witch and don't even understand what they're saying. So I don't know that. I mean, I know a lot of Christians that I would consider witches who would never claim to be witches. I know a lot of witches that I would claim to be Christians, and they'd probably try to put some spells on me for saying that.
Right.
Well, we know witches are real because they televise The View.
All right. Well, guys, we're going to start wrapping it up. I do want to just tell everybody out there, look, guys, I am on the believing side. I do side with Jen, Stacy, and Chanel on most everything they said. But I had to play the part of the devil's advocate and kind of press on them just a little bit tonight to try to get some good stuff out of them. And I think they did an amazing job, guys. So if you're at home, give them a round of applause because they deserved it. They gave us a lot of great information, way detailed information in some cases. So I love it. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember, the greatest compliment you can do, guys, is click that like button. That's first and foremost. And for the 40 to 50% of you that aren't subscribed and they're watching this, just click subscribe. It's free. Okay. That's going to help spread this out there and keep growing this channel. So guys, thank you all so much and tune in next week because again, we've got some great subjects and you're not going to want to miss next week. So guys, we'll see you next week. And remember, let's seek the truth together.